we got to come in from that side. So I guess you need like 10 extra hands. Hi there, this is Ray with Easy Simple Mechanic. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to try and get back on this transmission here for that forklift. Finally got some parts. We had to have some parts made. I also had a new clutch made for this. Actually, it was a rebuilt. I used my old clutch hub and I had them reline it so that we could use it because I couldn't find them. This is the piece that I showed you that was broken and that I had made for this transmission. So if you need work done, Messia Industrial Machine in Las Cruces, New Mexico, were able to make this for me. I couldn't find a machine shop in El Paso or in the area so that could do it because of the hardness of this material. So they were able to do it. Hopefully it works out and we'll be able to get this thing back in there and working. So let's get with it. I didn't want to bore you guys with all the cleaning, but the first thing we did was clean this completely out. Make sure we got all the shavings and everything out of the case here. And we also cleaned off this differential. Made sure we got all that. We cleaned out the gaskets off of the face there where we're going to put a seal. And over here, we cleaned pretty much everything on these. We cleaned these gears up. Now we did have this bushing made and it seems to fit just right. So it's a good thing we found a machinist here. So now we're ready to go back together with this. So this is going to be kind of tricky because I got to put the gears in as I put the shaft from the differential in. So I'm going to be needing both hands in there. We're just going to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this gear set inside the transmission and then I'll try and line up the differential. These splines here go on this center sleeve. It has splines on the inside. That's the only thing that should make contact with those splines. See, that was the issue before. What was happening is the gear was bound to this bushing that broke, which was then bound to the shaft. So now everything should turn freely. Both of these spin in there pretty good. And we should be able to put this back together now. So let's see if we can't put this in there. Now on these surfaces where you're gonna have a seal sit, like in this one, it has an O-ring that sits in this groove. You wanna make sure that you sand all the rust or anything that's in there because you want a smooth surface for that seal to sit on. Otherwise it won't seal. So there was some rust because this part of it, of this shaft, stuck out into the bell housing. It goes in here, and half of it stuck out, so it had some rust on it and some dirt. So you want to make sure we get those clean. This one in here had a lot of silicone and crud in there, so we had to clean that up. And obviously, I spent a lot of time cleaning all these surfaces because I definitely don't want to be taking this apart anytime soon. So we want to make sure those surfaces are clean and that they're dry. If you're going to use silicone on them, you know, you got to use some brake parts cleaner or something to make sure that the surfaces are oil free for the parts that are going to take silicone. Now in this case, what I found is that they had the O-ring on it, and then they had some silicone also on it. So what I'm gonna do, just to put this together to see if everything is the way it needs to be, I'm gonna go ahead and throw the seal on here, put it in there to make sure, you know, that it goes in there the way it's supposed to. I'm gonna slide it in and put everything together and just make sure everything's fine. Once it's fine, I'm gonna pull this back, and then I'm gonna go ahead and get some silicone on there and make sure that silicone sits in here around these bolts. Why they had silicone in there, I don't know, but it was factory. So I'm assuming they didn't want it to leak either, because it's not an easy thing to work on this stuff, you know, and also it may be to help so that it doesn't stick so bad that it doesn't want to come apart when you go to take it apart, in case you were to get some rust or something on there. But it was just the slightest thin layer of silicone. So that's what we're gonna do there. I noticed that also on the input shaft cover here. It had a gasket, but it also had silicone on it. So on those surfaces, and this one too, on the back side here. So on all those surfaces, I'm gonna have to make some gaskets for those, but I'm also going to put just the thinnest layer of silicone on there, just to make sure. Okay, a mock assembly here. We can see, I just went ahead and put it on there. I put a couple nuts on each side just to make sure that doesn't come apart there. But this obviously shows this goes in this way. There's a shoulder on that pin that slides in. Then with the input shaft in there and this fork in there, shift fork in there, we can see how this transmission should work, right? So if we look at the back ring gear, and we have this slid onto the back gear, right? So that's reverse. Then what we should have is we should have that gear turn towards us, because that would be reverse in the forklift. So if we turn the shaft, we can see that the gear turns in reverse. Okay, now if we shift this gear into forward gear, which is towards the front, right, we go ahead and lock that in there. I'm having trouble getting that locked in. There we go. Okay, so now we have it locked in to the forward position. So if we turn this, that rig gear should turn away from us. And it does. Okay, and then as before, if we had this in neutral, it wouldn't turn anywhere. It was stayed locked up. But as you can see now, in the neutral position, if you look here, the gears spin, right, as they should in neutral. The gears spin, but the ring gear doesn't move at all. So it's in neutral. So this is how it goes back together. Now we know everything is okay. All the bushings and everything seem to be working the way they need to. So now I'm confident that the piece that they made for me and everything is going to work out fine. So now it's just a matter of pull it apart one more time, and we'll get some silicone on there. We'll go ahead and tighten this up. We'll go ahead and get those bolts on there, and then we'll go ahead and push the bearing on there through here. Now when I took it off, I had to pull that back because we couldn't get it out through here. We were having trouble, so I pulled it apart there. But this is gonna have to go in there and get knocked in, and then we'll put the nut on there on the end of that, and we'll draw it all in there the way it's supposed to be before we put the seal on. So that's kind of how we're gonna have to do that to get this all put together. So let's take it back apart now. So we got a thin layer of silicone on here. We're just gonna go ahead and try and get this put back together. Take that off because we got to put our fork in there, and we're not going to put this input shaft in here until we get this put back into the forklift. Why? Because trying to get this aligned, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the shaft to align the clutch on the forklift, and so that it'll be aligned, and then we'll put the transmission, mount it and everything, and then we'll go ahead and stick the shaft in and get it in there. That way will be the best way to do that, so that we're not messing with trying to get this whole thing lined up with this differential and the housing and everything else. So I figured that would be, since they made it easy for us that way, that's how we're going to do it. Now the next thing we want to put in is we want to put in this idler gear in there. Now what you guys didn't see is I went ahead, and you never want to put these seals in dry, so I got a little bit of oil on here just to make it smooth, and I lubricated the bearing inside this idler gear, and I went ahead and I put some oil in here on these surfaces so that it'll slide in there. Now the difficult part is that we got to take this off to slide it through, and we got to go through 2 bushings. So if you put that oil on there, it'll help hold at least that one. This other one might be a challenge to get in there without having it fall down in the bottom of the tray. Oops, see what I mean? Those bushings, let me wipe it down. Don't want to get any dirt in there. The difficult part is that the gear has to also at the same time line up with that gear. So we got to come in from that side. So I guess you need like 10 extra hands for this stuff. But I will try and hold that. With my finger in there, and if I can get a little screwdriver in behind it, something maybe like this this little extension there is keeping those bushings or shims or whatever you want to call them from falling down in the transmission. So I just pressed the gear against the case till I got this shaft started. Now I got to get this other bushing in there. The shaft went through both bushings. Now I can go ahead and work on this. Now on the front side of this, and I don't know if you can see that, but there's a groove right here. And there's a retainer that holds that in there. So one of these little retainers with 2 bolts. And once we get that shaft in there far enough, we got to leave that lined up. There we go. Now you don't want to force it if that seal is pinching off or whatever, so that's why it's good to have it lubricated. You don't want to force it and tear the O-ring. Especially these O-rings, they were really hard to find. Okay, now these things here just go in there with this little retainer, goes right in there. There we are. Now you can guide the other one in wherever it needs to be. Well, that retainer will hold that shaft from going either in or out. But if you wanted to and you don't feel comfortable with your strength or how tight they should be, then you might want to do that. These are probably between 25 and 30. That's good. That's good. And they have a lock washer on them, so what you don't want to do is tighten them so much that you strip them. That's no good. That's no So we got this seal installed down there on the bottom. If you can see that red around there, I got some of that RTV on there. I went ahead and installed this seal, that input shaft seal on this housing. And I went ahead and made a gasket and put it on here. We're just gonna bolt it up now. Well, we got this clutch release bearing on there. Put everything that we need there, so it looks like this thing is pretty much ready. And we'll get it back into the forklift. Well, folks, I guess that's gonna do it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.